Great, thanks for that. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session. I hope you've had a great morning today in the past few days. Unfortunately, it's not something that I was able to come over there and do live. I don't think the world's quite back to normal as we'd hoped. I do think, however, we have got a couple of my colleagues or employees there with you today, so hopefully you've had a chance to bump into those or at least say hello to them. The title of today's session: Simplifying the Availability and Maintainability of NoSQL Technologies in the Cloud. Now, I know availability and maintainability aren't exactly the most exciting topics, but hopefully we can change that a little bit, and I'll keep this as exciting as I can. Now, I do realize we've only got, I think it's 20 minutes available for the session. Guys, if you've got any questions, I know we've got this Q&A section, we've got the comment section. I'm going to try and go back and forth between the two. Open up the Agorify app and start plugging those questions away if you have anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the talk. It could be about the company, which I will go over very shortly at the start. So please fill those questions up. We do have some time at the end if you want to stay behind and ask a few of those. And I will be available for the rest of the day to look back at some questions if there isn't anything that comes to mind straight away. But let's get started with the session. Like I said, I want to talk a little bit about Couchbase, right? This isn't what I'm here to talk about mainly, but I think you need to get an understanding of who we are, what we do, where we come from, in order for us to then understand how we're tackling this problem of availability and maintainability. Then we're going to have to start looking at the problem. Start looking at some cloud adoption techniques and strategies that I've been seeing from some of my biggest customers and even some of my smallest customers as we sort of take this next stage of digital transformation into the cloud. Then we're going to start looking at the whole idea of multi and hybrid cloud solutions, which I think is where everybody should start to be at, or if they're not already there, going forward, or in the new future, or in the near future, I should say. Let me introduce myself, though. I'm Daniel Ball. I'm a solutions engineer. I've been at Couchbase for just under 2 years now. Prior to this, I've been a Scrum Master. I've been a software developer. I've been a quality assurance tester. So I've had my fingers in all the pies, let's say, and I've had my fair share of experiences in the software development industry. So, like I said, I've got a lot of different knowledge bases from a lot of different areas. Let's kick things off, though, and talk a very little bit about Couchbase. Hopefully, you guys have heard of us. I really do hope that. If you haven't, let me do a very quick overview. At the very core, we're a NoSQL database, right? We're built on top of a schemaless distributed system, all right? And the reason we have the distribution is for high availability. And then we have the schemaless architecture for agility and the idea of scaling up or out as you start to grow your system. Now, looking at the platform where we have, there's a little bit more than just a memory-first architecture with a distributed document database. We have things like the full text search capabilities, the mobile offline capabilities, the analytics capabilities, all the things that you start to see customers and typical applications use and manipulate the data. Okay, but we've actually been able to build all this stuff ourselves. We will never claim to be an analytics database, right? That's not what we do, but we have the analytical capabilities to achieve all this thing under the same product, all right? And like I said, we don't have to really bring in third-party vendors to achieve any of these goals. And that kind of stands us out, right? It sets us apart from other NoSQL technologies out there who tend to pick and choose how to build these sorts of monolithic applications. I think the sort of most unique and the most sort of feature-defining aspect of Couchbase is the idea of multi-dimensional scaling. Okay, as we mentioned, there's quite a few things on there. As I scale out my clusters, as I start to grow my application, do I really want all of my resources being consumed by an analytics service that I never use? You don't have to. You can independently scale each of these services up and out, irrespective of each other. So there is no resource contention. And they're not fighting for the same memory, the same CPU. You can separate all these services out and grow them independently as much as you like, or you don't have to use them at all. Okay, and that allows us to be the most performant NoSQL database at scale. But that's all I want to talk about in terms of Couchbase. Just a very quick couple of minutes overview of who we are and also what we do. Let's start talking about the main topic of the conversation here, right? And that is availability. And also maintainability. But we're going to start with availability first. And I kind of want to take you on a bit of a journey, a little bit of a story of where I started out in the industry, how I've moved on to being in this company, and then obviously, the sort of the database solutions as they've been going through that time. Like I said, it's going to be very focused on availability to start with. So there once was a day where all of our information would be stored on something called a SQL server or a relational database, right? And we would have one box that would be our database. All of our information would be on that one machine. And that come into a couple of problems, right? If I needed to expand this machining anyway, I'd probably have to take it offline. If I wanted to grow this out, I'd have to take it offline. If I had to make big changes, I'd have to take it offline. If I had to upgrade this in any way, the OS or even just the database software, I'd have to take this offline. And so there wasn't really much when it came to availability. These were things that we had to do. We had to take the downtime. We used to have websites that would say, we'll be back in 30 minutes, I promise you. Right, and that was the problem that we had, and that was the sort of the first level or the first issue that we had when it came to high availability with the old style databases. I know we've come a long way from there now, but there was that problem. The availability wasn't really there for our applications. But as we start to embed applications in our day-to-day life, as we start to use websites every couple of seconds of the day, availability becomes important. The experiences that customers have on our applications and software is extremely important. Any downtime you see on an application, on a game, for example, anything you use in these days, it would affect your opinion on that application, and therefore it would affect your opinion on that company. Okay, availability is key. Availability is fundamental to the success of your software. So we move forward slightly, and the idea of distributed systems came about. Well, instead of just having everything in one place, why don't we have it in multiple places? Unfortunately, although the probability isn't quite high, we do tend to see computers not stay up as long as we'd like them to, right? Sometimes they do turn off. Sometimes they don't go right. Sometimes they're not working. And although the probability is small, if there is the chance that it can happen, we have to cater for that. And that's where the distributed system comes in. And that's where a product like Couchbase comes in, right? And NoSQL technology. Hey, let's distribute your information up amongst multiple nodes. In that case, if one of those nodes was to go down, we've still got two other machines or servers in there that have the information. Our application can carry on running as if there was no problem. Now, none of this is new to you guys. This is just distributed architecture. Like I said, I'm just taking you through the story. And it's not just for node failures, right? If I want to upgrade one of these machines, I can take one out, I can upgrade it, I can bring in another machine to kind of replace that, and we can continue on, okay? So that's the second layer of high availability. I now have single node failure resiliency. If one of my machines was to go, doesn't worry. We can account for that, all right? Then we take things forwards just a little bit further, and we had the idea of, well, what if an entire rack was to go down? Okay, what if multiple servers were to disappear, or I needed to take that entire rack offline? Then we've basically added on another level, right? Another layer. I should have used the word layers in this presentation, but I think it's a good way of describing it. We now have the third layer of high availability. What if all three of those nodes went down? And that's where you introduce stuff like rack zone awareness or server group awareness, okay? And when you have that configured and set up, you can now have the resiliency against entire racks being taken offline, entire server groups being taken offline, and your application is still fully operational. Your software is still fully operational. Your customer satisfaction is still as good as it can be. Okay, that's that next level. And so we had to create something for it. Now, as you go through these things, you start thinking, well, the chances of me actually losing multiple nodes is quite small. The chance of me losing an entire rack is even smaller. However, if I go back to my statement before, although the probabilities are not great, because it can happen, we have to consider it. We have to consider it at every level because there is the chance. If we take this forward now, right, we have resiliency against the rack. We have resiliency against multiple nodes in a server group going down. And then we come to the introduction of multiple data centers, right, and replication between these data centers around the world. Okay, let me actually start putting another set of servers, somewhere completely different. So if anything was to ever happen with that one area, I now have resiliency where I can actually deploy something in America, or I can deploy something in Africa if I really wanted to. And so if anything was to happen to that entire region, natural disasters happen, forest fires, things like that. We now have that high availability because we have the information somewhere else in the world, right? And that's the fourth level now, the region failures, the data center failures. Hi, Ahmed, how are you going? And it's that next level of high availability that has now been introduced as we start to make things bigger and better and we get larger. So what's next? What happens after that? What is the fifth level of high availability? This is something I've thought about for a while, and we're going to talk about it a little bit further on as we go through, but there's something else we need to consider, and that's what I'm going to introduce you guys to. This is the cloud complex. I like this name. I coined this term. We all have cloud providers fighting tooth and nail to be the one cloud provider. We have the correct services and infrastructure available for all of your needs. Okay, and then you've got another cloud provider coming in and saying, hey, you know what that other one's doing? We've got that. We've got it, but we've got better. All right, and so what we're going to see is this complete distribution of utilization of cloud providers from different companies. Okay, and this is something I'm starting to see with a lot of my customers. I'm going to them and saying, hey, which cloud provider are you using? And they said, hey, we got a really good deal with Azure, or we got a really good deal with IBM. We really like the services that Alibaba has to offer. Or AWS has this really cool feature. We need to have that. And so they're onboarding their entire company onto the cloud service provider as if it is the one and only cloud service provider that they're ever going to use. Now, this is a good thing in the sense that you're probably going to get discounts. You're going to save some money. AWS might come along and say, hey, if you're going to put your whole company on us, hey, here's a little bit of money off, right? Here's a little bit of a discount. Oh, let's give you some help in doing that because everyone wants you to use their own things. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I've had my fair share of roles, and one of those was being a Scrum Master. Okay, and I noticed that outside of the business owner's objectives, the Scrum team should feel empowered to choose the technology of choice. And we also understand that in the development world, in the software engineering world, not everybody sticks around at companies for 10, 15, 20 years. What we tend to see is quite a lot of movement, right? Especially from the younger guys, okay? So they're going to be brought up in a company where they're fully AWS, and then they're going to move over to somewhere where Azure was completely taken over. Okay, and hopefully you guys are going to start to see this pattern soon as well. And so we're actually going to end up with development teams and people within companies that have skills and knowledge on each and every single one of these cloud providers. All right? This is what I'm seeing, by the way. This is what I'm starting to see. Now, after a while, those discounts won't really matter. You'll be paying the same price and everyone will be providing similar sorts of services. But what's going to stand out is certain cloud providers are going to focus on certain things. Certain cloud providers are going to be better at tasks than others. Some might be really good at deploying services. Some might be really good at setting up the infrastructure. Some might be better at performance. Some might be better at simplicity and ease of use. The fact of the matter is you shouldn't really have to matter which one does what. You should have the freedom and flexibility to pick and choose which cloud provider is going to provide the right solution for the application that I'm trying to build. Which cloud provider should I use to get the best for my application, the best for my customer experience? And that should be irrespective of which cloud provider you should choose. You shouldn't be forced into any of them. And like I said, with the Scrum analogy and being completely agile, when the business owners come in with objectives, the Scrum team itself should not be told which cloud provider they have to use. They should choose the cloud provider they want to use. So when you have this mixed, what's the word I used before? This cross-contaminated team of knowledge full of different cloud providers, and you get this application you need to build, and they say, hey, listen, I had a really good experience with Azure when we tried to do something similar back in my old company. We really should use this. It's a lot better than this other cloud provider. And so you should be able to use that. But then there might be another application which Google Cloud Platform has the best services and features for your application. And they should have the freedom and empowerment to pick and choose these cloud platforms. Okay. So now we have all these different applications being utilized by all these different cloud providers. These guys think it's going to be one guy ruling everything, when in reality, we all know it's probably going to be, like I said, a cross-contamination and a sort of mismatch of all these things. We need solutions. We need software that is going to be able to support this approach, right? We're going to need solutions and software that are going to be able to help me in my multi-cloud, hybrid cloud journey. And we kind of want to bring this back to availability and maintainability. Now, this has kind of been a lot of general stuff right now, but when we bring this back to Couchbase and what we're seeing and how we're trying to react to this and how we're trying to change this, we built a product called Couchbase Cloud, right? And it is that fully managed database as a service offering, which provides you the deployments, the management, the scaling, the failovers, the upgrading, all autonomously. As we start to remove the maintainability aspect of a database, which prior to, when we go back to single server SQL machines, the maintainability was quite high. When we have fixed schemas and a lot of change that requires a lot of attention, the maintainability is quite high. The TCO is high. When you move to a more flexible and agile and managed service, you don't need those hours and hours and hours to look after these things anymore. And what I'm seeing is database resources and teams are actually being reutilized into innovation, into creation. If we can just take the pain of databases away from people, you can re-resource your teams, your members into innovating, creating new things and focusing on new things. All right, that's what the fully managed offering does. All you do is you plug it in and you play with it, and then you leave the rest up to us. Okay. So then we say to ourselves, hey, listen, we don't care what cloud provider you're going to. We're going to work and we're going to build to support any of these cloud providers. And you're going to see everything from the same place, right? One single pane of glass. You can manage and maintain all of these different NoSQL technologies. But then let's go back to the availability talk. If we now have everything in different cloud providers, what's that fifth level of high availability? What if an entire cloud provider was to go down? Right? Are we resilient enough for that? Probability-wise tells us that it's probably never going to happen, right? What if it never happened? We haven't seen it happen yet, so why should we care about that? But if all of a sudden AWS's data centers went offline, are you prepared? Are you resilient enough to stand up? Do you have that preparation in place to stay active, stay aligned, to stay operational? And that's why you need things like a NoSQL technology, which is going to be resilient enough for that has the high availability to cover things like that. Combine that with the maintainability of the autonomy of the fully managed service. I now have a fully flexible NoSQL technology to accompany and to support that application development, no matter where it goes, no matter which cloud provider you go and deploy on. You need the confidence that, hey, with all these things that are changing and all these different decisions that I have to make, my database software that I'm going to be using for everything is done. It's completed. I don't have to worry about that anymore. That is not a problem I need to solve any further. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay. A world where we can have Azure clusters, Google Cloud clusters, AWS clusters, and they all treat each other like they're equal. We can just move and replicate the information between each of these things without any problems, without any issues. All right. But what's the future hold? We have this hybrid deployment, multi-cloud deployment of cloud providers going forward. Absolutely fine. We have the idea of auto-scaling coming in, and that's coming scarily fast. Imagine the day where you could connect up to a database. You don't have to worry about what's going on behind the scenes, and it can automatically start to add, reduce, and mitigate nodes depending on how resourceful and how intensive your application is going to be. We have a lot of customers that have Black Friday events, right? And during these times, they need to scale their clusters up to support the workload. And at the end, they scale things back down to remove the workload. Imagine if that was autonomous. Imagine if they didn't have to touch it and everything was sorted out for them behind the scenes. That is what I'm looking forward to in the future. So thank you for the talk. I just hit 20 minutes perfectly. I know it's not the most interesting topic when it comes to availability, and it's something you've heard about a lot and already thought about as you're moving forward, but just trying to get you to think about something different. That extra level of high availability, which isn't being considered just yet. Try and get there first. Try and get there before anyone. If you have any questions, like I said, for me personally, about the talk specifically or about the company, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section or the comments section. I'll be sitting here for another 5 minutes or so, and I'll be coming back to this session throughout the day just to see if there's anything that I missed. But guys, thank you. Have a lovely conference. And yeah, I appreciate your time. Cheers.